Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're just about ready to get going. We'll allow people to file into the room here and let the audience grow. Unlike other systems we've used where everybody just immediately appears once we start, with Zoom, it seems like they allow you to enter literally single file as we watch the numbers increase. So we'll just give a minute to let everybody get into the room and I suppose find their virtual seat. And then we'll get started here. Okay, it looks like we have plateaued for the moment. I'm sure we'll get other people join us over the first 5 minutes, as is always the case. So welcome and thank you for joining us here today for this conversation about safe, secure, and trustworthy AI. If the conversation during the green room segment is any indication, this is going to be a fun conversation, because as we were looking at that AI, Chris said, well, I hope people didn't think that was Al. And then that led me to say, well, it maybe Hal, from 2001, The Space Odyssey. And then we started talking about the Terminator movies, which are always fun. And hopefully there will be no Terminators in your patent-related AI. But lots of interesting topics here. This is front of mind for everybody, or really should be front of mind for everybody, because the tools that are available are so powerful, and we're just starting to scratch the surface. So hopefully you all have a strategy to use them, and if you don't, hopefully by the end of this hour you will have a strategy to start using and engaging with AI in what needs to be a secure and safe environment. Trustworthy, quote unquote, AI is becoming the key word here, and that's what we're gonna discuss. So Renee, why don't we go ahead and introduce the speakers and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. All right, so on the top of your screen, you see Chris Tones. Chris is a solutions architect at IP.com based out of Fairport, New York, where he works closely with the product line management and science teams to gather and implement customer feedback, prioritize feature development, and support upcoming releases. Chris also supports the sales team at IP.com, technical demonstrations and trainings, with a particular focus on utilizing the IP suite of solutions to help partners identify and impact crucial IP-centric KPIs that drive ROI within their business. Next, we have Jim Durkin. He's a former USPTO patent examiner and managing director of product management at IP.com, where he works directly with clients across the globe and IP.com's development team to enable AI-assisted workflow solutions related to IP.com's different platforms, including Insight Reports, Innovation Discovery, their AI-driven search platform, Innovation Q, and its flagship prior art database for defensive publication. Having a BS in computer science, Jim is a registered patent attorney, inventor, and former primary patent examiner for the USPTO graphical user interface area. And last but not least, we have our moderator, Gene Quinn. He's a patent attorney and a leading commenter on patent law and innovation policy. He founded IPWatchdog in 1999 and since has twice been named one of the top 50 most influential people in IP. He's also repeatedly been recognized as one of the top IP strategists in the world. So you are in good hands with this panel. Back to you, Gene.
Great. Thanks, Renee. And thank you all for joining us. And thank you, speakers, for being here. And we've got an ambitious agenda. This is the agenda that we're going to try and get through in the hour that we have with you here today. But before we get going, what I would like to do is get Chris and Jim into the conversation to give us their preliminary thoughts to kind of plant the seeds that will grow throughout the hour. So Jim, how about we go with you first? When you hear the topic, secure, safe, trustworthy AI, what is it that first comes to your mind that you want to share with the audience?
Well, I think the first thing is to kind of set some expectations about what we mean in terms of artificial intelligence. It's a very broad area. I think a lot of people think about things these days like generative AI, which is one specific type of AI that you can chat with, like ChatGPT, for example. But there's really AI impacting all areas of our lives, from voice assistants like Siri to self-driving cars. And I would encourage everyone to keep in mind the four main types of AI. First is a reactive AI. So for example, like IBM's Deep Blue chess system, and that does not have a memory. And kind of the next generation of AI after that is limited memory AIs. One example being generative AI, also used in things like self-driving cars. And these have some memory of past events that can influence how they react to your questions, how they determine an action, say in the self-driving car example. And that's really a very powerful development in the space of artificial intelligence. And the last two are theoretical. Theory of the mind is the next type of AI, which is where we could mimic human-like mental states using artificial intelligence. And then kind of the ultimate goal of AI is that theoretical self-aware AI, and that would be the fourth category as well. So I would encourage everyone just to keep in mind these broad types, and then a little later in the discussion, we'll get into some of the different specific models that we leverage.
Great, thanks, Jim. And Chris, your initial thoughts.
Yeah, when it comes to trustworthy AI, I think one of the most important things is transparency from those who create the AI. I think it's very important to not only be aware of the security measures that are in place, but also to be fully aware of the methods by which an AI is trained and its purpose. So for a developer to be transparent in all of those details is critical and paramount when it comes to deciding which AI is trustworthy.
Yeah, great, great. So I don't really have any preliminary thoughts here. I'm going to want to let this unfold and see where we go. I mean, I guess my preliminary thought would simply be is that you really need to be investigating using AI. You just have to look at it responsibly and make sure that the folks that you're working with are equally looking at it responsibly. And you know, not to throw anybody under the bus or anything, but you probably have all seen these emails going about by salespeople who clearly don't understand what it is that we do. You know, they'll say things like, you know, it takes you, they'll try and lay out the time savings that you'll have if you use their AI solution. They'll say, it takes you 2 hours to draft a patent. You could draft a patent application in 5 minutes with AI. Okay, now that screams that whoever sent that email does not have any knowledge about what it is that we do. So I think, you know, trustworthy, secure, safe AI has to start with talking to reliable people who are real professionals and know the industry, and staying away from just the proliferation of really charlatans that are out there that don't know what we do and probably don't really have a very good solution either if they have to make outrageous claims like that. So that's my preliminary thoughts on the matter. So gentlemen, we have I guess that probably is a bit of our initial overview, but Jim, do you have anything else by way of initial overview?
Well, there's just one thing I wanted to get across to everyone before we get into some of the details of our solutions and how AI can impact the IP industry. And that was just to set a couple definitions. And in terms of AI, there's a general category or field of study called machine learning. And that's dealing with algorithms and statistical models that can help learn patterns and make predictions. So a good example of that could be like when you log into Netflix and it recommends a particular video for you to watch. And then there's subsets within machine learning that we leverage at IP.com, one of which, for example, is deep learning. And deep learning uses neural networks that are inspired by the structure and function of the human brain. It's used in things like computer vision, medical image analysis, semantic search, like we do at IP.com. And it's about extracting features from raw inputs using layers, very similar to how the human brain works. And then one other type of AI I wanted to discuss, which is a subset of machine learning, is natural language processing. And that's algorithms and models that help understand and interpret human language in a way that's contextually relevant. And that's the key to the accuracy of IP.com's semantic search solution. And it's also the key to what's behind a lot of these generative AI models. So just to take a moment, Gene, just to set some expectations on some of the common phrases that you hear in the industry. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Chris, anything to add, or are we ready to jump in?
I think we could just jump into what this looks like in a practical use case for sure.
Okay, so Jim, why don't you take us through AI for innovation in the IP industry?
Sure. So when you think about innovation in the IP industry, it can really cover all sorts of different things. So for example, you know, a lot of people kind of think, I think sometimes that it starts with an invention disclosure, but it really doesn't. It's kind of, there's an initial process of product design, prototyping, brainstorming, and iteration. That's really where the creativity comes out and ultimately provides the content that is put into that invention disclosure. We believe that's one critical area where AI can augment human intelligence. You can also think of it more broadly than just intellectual property and think about how you bring things to market. For example, creating content, marketing, doing copywriting, advertising. And then there's a number of core legal use cases that AI can assist with. For example, semantic searching, patent valuations, assisting in discovery with litigation, helping draft claims. There's a variety of use cases that kind of relate to IP specifically, but I would encourage everyone on the call to think about it a little more broadly and think about your overall life cycle of innovation and what steps in that process the AI may be able to assist with.
Okay, great. Chris, any thoughts there, or you want to just jump right into the real world use?
Let's go ahead and jump into the real world use cases for AI.
Okay, great. Take it away.
Sure. So if you want to flip to the next slide real quick, we're going to start to take a look at what the interface looks like when you're using the AI, especially here in Innovation Queue.
And Chris, can I just quickly interrupt you?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, but I just want to let everybody know, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot us questions in the Q&A box, because we're going to go through a couple slides here with some detail. And if there's anything that needs a little bit more explanation, happy to try and get that to you. If it's a lot of explanation, then maybe we'll do it offline, but we want to try and make this a good webinar for everybody who's here. So shoot your questions to us. Chris, go right ahead.
Absolutely. So when you're utilizing GIST or any sort of semantic search over more traditional searching methods like keyword searching or Boolean filters with technology codes, one of the big differences is you're going to be able to input natural language and large amounts of that natural language to start a search like this. You can start with something like an invention disclosure, an abstract, maybe a claim of a patent, or we can even utilize an entire document to start a search. Something that GIST is very good at is creating a nice low dimensionality signature for these documents or large queries and being able to match it with high accuracy, high levels of accuracy to what's out there right now. Because of the way that we work with GIST and we train it, it is able to break these large amounts of text down and start to search on meaning, which is going to provide a lot of additional functionality, especially, keyword searching, technology code searching. They have their limitations and they require a lot of training to be able to make sure you're not missing anything. GIST is going to be able to go that next level deeper and start to search based on the meaning of what you're looking for and start to find those results, even if they're in a separate technology space altogether. You're using different words to talk about this technology. When it comes to evaluating the results that are coming back from GIST, we want to make it pretty clear as to how GIST is breaking down this query. So if you want to flip to the next slide real quick, what I've done is I've gone into one of the results here. The first thing I want to point out is on the right-hand side of the screen. We're going to show you keyword representations of the concepts GIST is looking for. So you get a sense for when you entered your query, what did it pick out as most important, and what is it really trying to match up here? The other thing I have up right now is we have an extractive AI within these documents called Synopsis AI that's designed to bring forward key paragraphs within each one of your results to help you quickly understand these documents at a pretty deep level. And here we can also see, how GIST is pulling back the top concepts that are in these results as well. So it's very quick and easy to understand how GIST is understanding what's going on, what's being input here. And it's the reason that, the USPTO, even though this is not an endorsement, did publicly state that they have used AI searching of this nature over 1 million times for evaluations when, submitting a patent application. And it's absolutely why something like this should be considered an essential component of a reasonable search alongside more traditional methods, back to that keyword searching, those technology code searching methods. We don't intend to get rid of those.
And that's going to become a very important topic, the reasonable search.
Absolutely.
Because you saw that in the recent PTAB case. I think it was Ironberg is the name of the case. I probably shouldn't have said that because it may not be, but there was a recent PTAB case that talked about estoppel and how it relates, and there will be more development of this as we move forward. But this idea of what is a reasonable search in this era is going to change. It has to change given the power of the tools. So I just wanted to put a pin in that, Chris, but continue, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to mention, following that our intention here with Innovation Q, all the platforms we offer, we are not replacing the IP professional. We're augmenting your capabilities to expand how much you can find, how quickly you can find those results, and just the content. We want to make sure you can find the best content. So if you want to flip to the next slide as well, I wanted to.
We do have a question about what is GIST specifically. If you want to, do you want to?
Well, maybe I could take that one if it's okay, Gene.
Sure, go for it.
So GIST is actually the third generation of our AI technology. It's battle tested, deployed at many large corporations and government institutes, and it really relies on two key aspects to the model. In fact, we have a patent that you can look up on what we call a unified model. And GIST is what creates the understanding of the documents in our system to enable the AI-assisted search. It comprises two major components. The first is a trigger model, which creates a vector for each document based upon the words and the probability of other words occurring near them. And the second aspect of the model is actually one of those deep learning neural networks, specifically an autoencoder. And the reason that we put it through an autoencoder is to take the representation of the initial data after we train it in the trigger model, which could be hundreds of thousands or millions of dimensions, and reduce it to a lower number of dimensions. And I was thinking of, a good way of explaining why we do this two-step process in our GIST engine. And it's almost like, if you go out to a restaurant and you order like, steak and eggs versus say eggs and ham versus say pancakes, that's pretty easy to do. But imagine if the menu had 1 million items and you had to specify all the different condiments and things like that were on it. It would be pretty difficult to order your breakfast. So the reason we use this two-step model in our system is so that we can reduce it into a way after it goes through the neural network that's easy and fast to retrieve. So with a smaller number of dimensions, we're able to retrieve data virtually instantly, which is ranked based upon the most important components, just like you wouldn't specify every single thing in your restaurant order at the time you ordered it. So I thought that's kind of an analogy a little bit about how it works, but it's a third generation semantic search model, which underlies all the analytics that we do in our system.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jim. Chris, back to you with this new slide here.
Sure. Firstly, I think I saw a question in chat about if search prompts are used to train our engine, and I want to address that first because that is critical. We do not use the user input data like search prompts to train our engine in the background. That's something that we do for the sake of security of the data, especially, we know that the stuff you're searching in, an IP platform is critical, needs to be kept, pretty secret, so that we do not use that to train in any way.
And that's essential. I mean, that in our space, you can't have cross-pollination from one firm to another firm or one client to another client. So this kind of siloed nature really gives you the best of both worlds. You get the power of the AI without the confidentiality problems.
Absolutely. And then the other side of the search platform here in Innovation Q is we utilize our AI to generate some visuals. Some of these are fairly simple, like ultimate parents charts or country of origin, but others like the topic map or the categories. These are going to be AI generated to help you parse your result set much quicker. So you can interact with these visuals in any way that you, using the tools here, any way that you'd like to, in order to really start to hone in on key concepts, key technologies that are in the space, along with getting a sense for what this space looks like as a whole and who is working in this in seconds, as opposed to potentially hours of collaborating this data all yourself. So this here shows the custom highlighting function where you can go in, add your own colors here and there to different data sets to create some pretty powerful visuals. But if you want to switch to the next page, we do also offer some quick gradients. So especially, when I'm doing a search here in Innovation Q, I'll tend to use these more, where In this case, we've added a gradient for that semantic relevance that is being generated from GIST. So now I can see very quickly the part of the technology space that sits closest to the concept I'm talking about, the companies that are filing closest, along with who has that largest portfolio. We have gradient overlays as well for things like dates, so you can see the newest technologies in the space very quickly. So this is going to really help parse down into that data, as opposed to, that at the individual document level, it can be somewhat difficult to see the overarching picture here. And the last thing I want to talk about is other platform that we have here at IP.com called IPWatchdog. So if you want to switch to that next slide, just because of its natural language processing and the way that it just takes a typical query from anyone, doesn't require much training, really lends itself to the democratization of IP searching because of that ease of use. There's no formal training, anything like that. So what we have here is we've taken GIST and moved it into a guided workflow that's designed to be used by someone like an engineer, which is actually where I came from. I was an engineer prior to being at IP.com. We ask for just simple inputs, like what's the problem you're trying to solve, what's the solution, and we're going to, one, give them a kind of a peek behind the door as to how the AI is breaking it down with those representative and related keywords. And two, we're going to help train them into creating the best possible disclosure with the AI concept evaluation, saying things like, maybe you're describing more than one invention here. We might not be seeing all essential elements of this invention, all coming from the pattern recognition capabilities of GIST here. So in this way, creators can hone that best possible idea before they escalate it to the IP teams. So your IP teams are going to focus more of their time, which is incredibly valuable, on only the best ideas here. And subsequently, this is going to increase the efficiency of some of the traditionally most expensive teams within an organization.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So,
I was actually going to say, if you want to skip the next slide and we can hit ROI real quick, I'd definitely like to talk about that. I think that's critical here.
okay. Before we do that, I was wondering if maybe we should launch one of the polls here and give people the opportunity, so we can find out. Well, actually, maybe why don't we go through ROI and then we'll ask a question or two.
Perfect. Go ahead and get to the next slide here, if you don't mind. Perfect. So, the couple softwares we've talked about so far, they increase efficiency, they increase quality, and obviously those impact almost countless KPIs. We find there's a few in particular, and we have got 10 listed here, that our solutions really lend themselves to, and something that we work with customers on a constant basis. So when we talk about, you can see the numbers in the background a little bit there, starting with one right up at the top with idea generation rate, going to idea iteration cycle time. This is going to be IPWatchdog, which we had just talked about. It's accelerating the rate that engineers are generating these ideas. We find that, with that immediate feedback, they tend to put more ideas through the system, and the more ideas reach the IP team. It's shortening the time it takes to hone that idea, going back to that novelty scoring. They're going to get that quick feedback from the engine about getting more focused on part of the idea that's probably more patentable than the rest of what they've typed in there. And for instance, we've actually seen this, one example of how we've seen this happen with one of our clients is with Shadow Ridge Analytics, a government contractor who works extensively with the military, takes in a lot of ideas from their engineering teams and basically has to provide a sense as to how patentable they are, or maybe a direction to take forward if they're not. Very manual process previously, but we worked with Shadow Ridge to implement ideas along with the corresponding insight reports. And we've taken that search time down from about 8 hours to around 2 hours per idea. So there's been a really significant efficiency gain by just using one of the more simple platforms that we offer here. When we're talking about GIST, Innovation Queue, that more traditional search platform, we're talking about KPIs relating to the patent research time, the publication quantity, the quality. We are making it, easier to find this prior art. And a great example of that actually is Joe Manico from Kodak Alaris, who's a professional researcher. He manages a very extensive portfolio there, and he attributes a lot of the success he's had over the years to the use of GIST, being that, no matter how much experience he has with his manual search methods, just always pulling back a couple of results that might have not appeared or are just like inherently better than what's pulled back by those manual methods there. The quicker research and quicker scoring means more publications from the same team. We're providing those better search results, and utilizing AI on top of those traditional methods typically means less rejection and a higher grant rate. When we talk about time to patent application or publication, this is critical. Everyone looks at this when they evaluate their business. All the efficiencies that we introduce pretty much play into this. We're looking at the life cycle of that idea from the moment it comes from the creator all the way to when it gets filed as an application, and we introduce efficiencies all along the way there. And last but not least, up in the top left, patent portfolio strength scoring. We do leverage our AI to provide performance indicators on the portfolio that you have. We correlate those scores to market trends, show how your patents are performing related to others in the same area, and help you assess for things like monetization potential, litigation risk, quality, strength, and really bring forward the best performers of your portfolio, along with showing you possible candidates for non-renewal based on certain scores. And this is all, I did a pretty high level over this right here, but this is all in our ROI of AI white paper, which is on IP.com's website.
Which we will make sure all of you have access to. We'll get that to anybody who's interested. So Jim, why don't Chris, are you, I see you took a break. Are you all done with this slide here now? Is there anything else?
Yeah.
Okay. So Jim, before I ask you to come in and get your comments and thoughts on this, why don't I launch our first poll question so we can let people get to answering this. Do you currently use AI to help with your IP related tasks? And Jim, while we're getting the answers for that, what are your thoughts on the KPIs and how they can be affected or helped, or maybe greater insights?
Well, yeah, I kind of think, Gene, that what we're going to be entering in the future is maybe a world, unfortunately, of kind of, AI have and have nots. There's going to be companies that have chosen to adopt it at this point in time, and those that don't. And the ones that do are going to see material differences. I especially think that's true in our first inventor to file world. Because if you can use AI at that ideation phase to get better invention disclosures, get more embodiments in your invention disclosures, and get them filed quicker, you're going to beat your competitors to the patent office. And, we're past the days of swearing behind references and all the things that you used to be able to do in kind of the old pre-America Invents Act. So I really think that it's going to become an issue primarily of timing acceleration. And if businesses don't adopt AI, really, in the near future, they could end up being hurt substantially in terms of being rejected on patents for prior art that, if they had used AI, would not have been available as prior art.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's look at the poll. The poll results here are interesting, I think. We have, can you see them now? I think you should be able to see them. So yes, people using AI is 25%. And maybe I shouldn't be surprised by that, because obviously, if you're coming to a webinar like this, I probably should have thoughtfully predicted that no, but you're currently investigating it would be the highest percentage of you all in the audience. And it is at 41%. No, we're staying away from it for the time being is 9%. And I can't necessarily say that that's an inappropriate response, but hopefully your eyes will be opened a little bit here. I think you should be staying away probably from certain AI, as a patent attorney, patent professionals, anything that has an open API where it's going to take what the input is that you give it, learn from it, and apply it to others. You have to stay away from that sort of stuff. The legal issues, the ethical issues are just enormous with the use of that variety of AI, which is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a much more controlled, safe, secure AI system. And just currently relying on human expertise hopefully your eyes will be opened here about the power of AI. And as Jim was saying, you know, with AI, there's all different levels of AI. There's just brute force AI. It's a really super fast computer, you know, like Deep Blue used to be. I mean, it's just massive computing power, and then it goes up from there. And with a lot of the AI, it's still yet to come. We're scratching the surface with it now. And to reiterate what Jim said, and for those of you who weren't here at the very beginning, the AI we're dealing with now has memory, and it's not, you know, a vast amount of memory, but it is memory, and it can learn. And you just want to make sure that when it's learning from you, and you know where it's taking the information from, and it's not incorporating stuff that it's done for others along the way. Jim, thoughts on the results here for this poll question?
Well, I think it's a fascinating poll question. And I would say, you know, I think there may be uses of AI that you may not consider AI. For example, semantic search is a type of AI. You know, not all types of AIs are generative AIs, and generative AI raises a particular class of challenges, which are kind of unique to it. I can say we are working on a next generation semantic gist technology, which will incorporate generative AI option. And, you know, I just wanted to say a little bit about that kind of in terms of the future. One thing is it's critical, you know, when we develop that we maintain the same privacy protections that we have in our semantic search. In other words, you know, not training on the client data. I think that's critical. And there was a question in the chat, which I think is really good, which is, you know, if you don't train on the client data, is the AI model static? And the answer is, you know, no, not really, because you can retrain it periodically. So we have an unsupervised approach, and we monitor our AI for things like semantic drift, for example, the meaning of words changing across time. And, you know, when it diverges too much in a data set, that's simply a good opportunity to retrain the system. So just because you're maintaining the confidentiality of your client queries does not mean that the AI is always fixed in time. It can ingest new data, it can respond to it, and once it's kind of drifted too far from where it was previously trained, you can just train it again. But I thought that was a wonderful question in the chat, so I wanted to address that also, Gene.
Yeah, and we just had a question come in because I mentioned certain AI that you just have to stay away from in our industry, and asked which do I know of that has an open API like that, and the biggest one is ChatGPT, and that's why you see that companies like Apple and Samsung and many others have said don't use ChatGPT online, because if you read the terms and conditions, at least last time I read them. And I'll come back to that in a minute, but the last time I read them, it said that their open API on the web would learn from whatever anybody put into it. So you can't go and start putting invention related information into an open API system where it's going to learn and share that information with subsequent people who come and use that tool. You just can't do that. We've had people at our programs, in-house people, one of them came out and said, if I found out one of our attorneys was using that, it would be the last time they got any work from us. You know, and your clients want to know. So it needs to be protected. It needs to be safe. It needs to be secure. So I don't know, Jim, whether you have any thoughts on that, or Chris, you have any thoughts on that, but that is really one of the issues that's keeping people scared of AI.
Well, I do think that's critical, and that's something we're addressing in our white paper, and, you know, we'll address in the future when we roll out our generative AI models. I think that's really critical. You have to have control over the servers. You have to be sure those kind of things aren't happening. But I did want to make kind of one other general point, is that this generative AI is not going anywhere. And in fact, it's only going to accelerate. If you look at the generational improvement, so one thing about generative AI is they use something called transformers. And a transformer is actually the T in ChatGPT. And it's a very powerful way of dealing with these word embeddings that I talked about earlier. It's kind of analogous to the trigger model I mentioned that our engine uses. And what's really important to understand about that type of AI is that you can parallelize it on a graphics card. And these graphics cards are extremely fast now. The generational improvement between generations of, say, graphics cards for NVIDIA could be 70, 80% uplift in performance, every year, year and a half as they come out with new generations of cards. If you look at like a computer processor, 15 or 20% uplift in instructions per cycle would be considered significant. And computer processors, because of that limitation, are starting to do things like add more cores or more cache. So I think, one takeaway that everyone should keep in mind is that the pace of the performance of these graphics cards is so incredibly fast, even as we're approaching some limits in terms of how small we can make them, that will drive growth in generative AI, which I don't know if it's fully appreciated at the moment. And I think that the generative AI 3 or 4 years from now is going to be very far ahead of where we're at today.
Yeah. And that's where, I had mentioned when I stopped myself just a minute ago, like the last time I checked the ChatGPT terms and conditions, because if you're not staying up on this, your knowledge is stale. Things are moving so fast. And, to dovetail with another question that I saw come in, how mature is this particular platform we're using? This is a 3rd generation platform. They're already developing the 4th generation, and they're continuing to move forward. And these things are changing very rapidly. So, if you're using them, you know that, and you know that they're getting better and better and better all the time. If you're not using them yet, I really think you need to at least start to get into the we're investigating it column real quickly, because the truth of the matter is that if you as a patent practitioner are not using this, you're going to get left behind, because the people who are using it are going to have a significant advantage. I mean, that's just the way it is. This tool, and it's going to become an advantage that is more and more and more significant over time with each generation, with each new platform, with each new feature set that is added into these systems, because the problem is in our industry has always been getting the best information, making the decisions based on that, and writing applications and prosecuting, having the best prior art, right? Now, with AI, if you're not finding it, you can rest assured that the examiners are going to find it, and they're going to reject you. And the patents, even if you get them through the office, are not going to be as good. They're not going to be as strong. They're going to be more susceptible to challenge in a PTAB universe, that we live in. So there's so many reasons to at least start investigating, but convince yourself that you're using a good tool, which we're going to get to here in a minute. But I want to launch another one of these questions here. Where do you think AI could have the greatest impact? Chris, any thoughts on anything that's been said over the last few minutes here?
I certainly agree with you that if you're not utilizing some sort of AI in your search, you're definitely falling behind. I mean, it's very well known that the larger patent offices especially are utilizing AI, and a lot of the smaller ones are as well, because of the way it can pull back results that would be missed, by more traditional methods, just because it can search based on meaning versus keyword matching. I absolutely agree with that, and it's something we actually see quite often here.
Yeah. Okay. So we still have some responses piling in. So I won't end this poll just yet, but we are going to end it here in a quick second. So if you want to get your answers in, please get them in now.
Real quick while we're waiting, if you don't mind, I saw there was a question in chat that Chris Irick answered about a low-cost model, but I wanted to address that for everyone on the call as well. We absolutely have a more affordable model for individual inventors or practitioners. If you navigate to IP.com and go to the storefront on the left-hand side of the web page, you'll find an e-commerce option with several tiers of the software. Some of which have lower amounts of features than others, but are significantly lower cost than something like a full enterprise license with all the intelligence that would come with it. So I just wanted to address that for everyone on the call.
Great. Thanks a lot, Chris. And I guess now is as good a time as any to end the poll and share the results here. And they're kind of all over the place. I mean, the largest number percentage is that people think that AI will be able to help with all of these things. One of the ones that the lowest one here is interesting is identifying actionable insights. I don't understand that, and I do. If that is low because the AI is not ready to actually on its own give you the insights, that's fine. But AI is opening up an entirely new universe for us as patent practitioners and patent professionals to gain actionable insights, to be able to identify information that we never could have gotten in any reasonable time frame. So it does lead on the tip of the spear to actionable insights. And that's the part, Jim, where we're not trying to replace the human here. The human has to take all of this information provided by the AI and then add the insight piece, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a very straightforward example is pruning a patent portfolio. You know, if you have several thousand patents or possibly more in a patent portfolio, you should be using AI in order to score and rank them to help you decide. You know, obviously you're aware of your seminal patents. There's going to be some patents that you may not understand the market position, you may not think they're as important. You can use AI to score and rank them to help you decide which ones you might want to take a second look at, you know, before you make an irreversible decision to, you know, stop paying maintenance fees and things like that. So I look at it not in the sense of, you know, I'm going to immediately just take action on whatever result the computer gives me, but more in the sense of just as a prioritization process for something like that. So, you know, and then, for example, you can spend more time on the high rank ones to do things like look at the independent claims, try to figure out the scope of the protected right for those patents. If you have no means of sorting, you know, in the example I gave, getting to the actionable insights manually could be very long, and you're going to ultimately end up looking at a lot of the same metrics the AI is already looking at. For example, you know, how many forward citations are there? How big's the patent family? Those are the kind of metrics that, you know, one would look at for that type of analysis.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so let me stop sharing this because I want to make sure that we get to the last slide, because I think this is where it really gets interesting, and you really need to make some strategic business decisions, I think. Right, Jim?
Yes, I would agree.
So let's just push that right now. And Jim, I think you said you're going to lead off here.
Oh, you know, I think Chris actually on this one.
Oh, Chris, go ahead. Sorry.
Sure, I can take this one. We just talked a lot about the concerns around AI and implementing it, and something that, you know, we would encourage, even if you don't go with IP.com or GIST, is to use a scorecard like this to evaluate a system before implementing it to make sure that it is responsible, ethical AI. So the first one is, you know, fairness. We want to make sure AI systems are unbiased against individuals or groups. Part of the way that we can address that, or that we do address that, is using unsupervised, unlabeled data for training the AI. We want to make sure there's accountability in the developers, which is something I had touched on, you know, at the start of this webinar here. We want to make sure developers are held responsible for the actions and impacts of their AI. For safety and security, we want to make sure, you know, AI is designed to prevent unintended harm to the users and the environment. Transparency, which I feel is paramount. You know, we want AI to be understandable to users and to stakeholders. We should make the objectives of the AI systems clear. Oversight, you know, human oversight of AI is critical for responsible use, and that is something that we maintain here. And then privacy, data protection, compliance. We want to ensure that the data that you use in this tool, which is actually, I think, a question we answered earlier, is secure, that we're not using it to train where it can be possibly regurgitated by the AI in front of another user. We want to make sure any information that is collected is used responsibly and is used with appropriate consent and safeguards. So we do have, I think this is going to be distributed to everyone on the call following the webinar. We have a white paper that goes in depth as to how we address each one of these concerns here to show you how we stack up. But again, this is something that I would encourage you to use with any use of any AI system, you know, not just IP.com or GIST. We want to make sure that everyone who's contributing in this space is doing so responsibly and ethically.
And, just to add a couple points to that I think are important. One question, by the way, from the chat, what do we train on? It is the patent data. So that's what we use for the basis of the training, global patent data. We are export control compliant, ITAR for the US. That can be critical if you have any export controlled inventions. As I mentioned, we don't train on customer data. We leverage the NIST framework to help safeguard us from attack. I mentioned earlier when I was talking about how we use an unsupervised deep learning approach for kind of that second step of our semantic gist engine. One key aspect of it being unsupervised is that we're not introducing biases like could happen if, for example, we trained it based upon classification codes. So we've tried to minimize bias in the system. And then one last thing to mention is President Biden recently issued an executive order on AI. And at IP.com, we're analyzing that currently to understand its impact. Seems to have a number of measures related to national security and other important strategic initiatives of the United States. We're still analyzing it, so it's a little early to state our position, but it's definitely a very important executive order.
Yeah, I think that came out earlier this week, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so that's fresh. This is changing all the time, and the government's trying to keep up. And but this is an interesting way to look at who it is that you want to do business with. And I would suggest that whether you're talking about doing it here in the patent space, or whether you're talking about using any AI tool for any reason in your business or personal life, these are great questions to ask. The fairness issue here talks discrimination or bias. I mean, that applies across the board in our space. It's a little bit different than bias or discrimination against a particular group, maybe as much as it is bias or discrimination against certain information or over leveraging certain information to give results that may be unnatural. These are the things that you have to think, and you could adjust all of these considerations for the very specific patent world. And specifically, transparency is so important to understand what's really going on here. Chris, any thought, or Jim, any other thoughts on this?
Not on this. Chris, did you have any?
No, just again, highlight the importance of transparency. I personally feel that understanding the AI is it's something I help customers do often. Obviously, as someone who doesn't work with AI all the time, such like we do here at IP.com, might not be familiar with the way that different AI types work, how they train, how they gather data. So I work with customers on a daily basis to help provide the transparency to the AI system that's underneath. And I find that to be really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And the issue of privacy and protection and compliance, that is going to be a gigantic area for AI, because if you're using information that you have, because here's how it plays out. You may be using information you don't have a right to use, and that's easy. That's an easy question. Okay, don't do it if you don't have a right to it. But the harder and issue that a lot of people aren't focusing on at all is you may have the right to use the information, but for what purpose and to what limitation? So there are all kinds of privacy and data protection issues that go into, are you using information beyond the scope of what it was intended for, or your rights go to? And so you want to be making sure that the AI that you're using is ethical and created properly, doesn't have unnecessary biases, and that you really know what's going on, and that there's somebody on the other side of this that has a reputation that they care about that's worth protecting. Because this stuff, it is evolving, and it should evolve, and it will evolve, and it's evolving quickly. So I think it's important to work with tools that you trust and people that you trust. Let me launch this last poll question here about obviousness. Now, this may seem like a bit of a, what does this have to do with what we're talking about here? And we can talk about why that is here in this question, but how much of an issue are obviousness rejections? So we'll give folks a minute to answer this question. Jim, do you want to explain while folks are getting their answer and why we added this question?
Sure. So we added this question because we actually wanted to talk about a really unique solution that we're launching in December related to one of our patented technologies, which is a way of using artificial intelligence to help with obviousness analysis, and in the process, try to democratize that analysis so that aspects of obviousness are made available even without having a legal background or understanding of, KSR or the rationales for combining references. Chris can talk about it in a little more detail. It's a technology that helps you find the most unique components of an invention, just like you would split up a search when you're doing an obviousness analysis. And I can also say, whether I was an examiner or an inventor or as a patent attorney, there seems to be no way to get away from obviousness. I think it's the most common rejection. It's usually a fairly small hurdle to get over novelty, and then you're stuck in obviousness for the rest of prosecution.
Yeah. So not shockingly, we have 6 out of 10 people saying that it's a significant issue, and 25% said it's a moderate issue. The 4% of you that said it's not a problem at all, I don't know what space you work in, but good for you. But 112 is a huge issue in every case anymore, and obviousness is a huge issue in every case anymore. And these are things that can be facilitated and much better outcomes if you are using the tools that are available and that will soon be available. I have never understood how you could do a competent job of writing a patent application if you don't know what else is out there and what can be found. I know I've had many arguments with people that tell me it's possible, and I would love to see their office actions. I would love to see what the rejections are that they get when you draft something not knowing what the examiner is going to be able to find. And now with the office using these types of tools that are ever more powerful, I can't for the life of me understand how you can do justice without knowing what's really going on. Jim, you were a patent examiner for a while. Did you ever hear from attorneys that, well, we did a search and we didn't find anything that you found, or didn't find what you found? It seems like you guys as examiners always found stuff that we didn't find.
Oh, of course, and it's really a function of time. When you get in litigation and you can turn over every stone, things come up that the examiner never would have found during prosecution. So it's really a function of time, and that's where the AI can accelerate it. And I'll tell you, Gene, when I was learning how to search, one of the hardest aspects of searching, in my opinion, is how do you know when you can't find that knockout reference that speaks to novelty? How do you know when to move into obviousness? And when you're dealing with obviousness, how do you know how to split up the components? If you have A, B, C, D, how do you know, which combinations to make of A, B, C, and D in order to find the relevant prior art? And doing it all manually, which is what we used to have to do, is extremely time consuming. So if you can have an AI that can automatically segment an invention, which our technology can, and then after it segments it, it can independently score and rank each component, which our technology can, and show you the prior art specific to all those components, then you immediately know, even if you're an inventor that has no understanding of obviousness because it's your first invention, let's say, and you haven't gone through prosecution yet, you would be able to figure out what the most unique part of the invention is and where you might want to add additional embodiments, additional details, give you a higher chance of allowance. So I'm super excited by this next generation of obviousness related, AI assistance, because I do think it's hard to say what's number one in prosecution these days. Is it 103 or 112? But you're right, Gene. Those are definitely the top two coming up.
Those are, and you have to use the tools that are out there to your advantage. And especially in a world with the PTAB, and I know the PTAB can't consider 112, at least not directly. They will consider 112 when they're talking about obviousness, though, because they're not going to allow you, patent owner, to urge a claim construction that you don't have adequate support for. So it's not that 112 never comes up in an IPR. It does. It comes up all the time. It comes up through an obviousness argument, and obviousness, as far as I can tell, is if you have a patent that is valuable, it is going to find its way into the PTAB. I mean, it's just the reality that we live in, right? And if you don't have a patent that's valuable enough to get scrutiny at the PTAB, then maybe you've got a nice single, but you don't have a double or a home run. I mean, because if it's a home run, you're going to be litigating, you're going to be licensing, you're going to be trying to enforce, and those are the exact patents that get at the PTAB. And Monday morning quarterbacking, looking in retrospect, is always so much easier. So I've always been perplexed at people that will file applications and don't know what the scope of the prior art is, because even if you know what the scope of the prior art is and you have a really good feel for it yourself, the examiner is going to put these things together in ways that you really, as the attorney, couldn't possibly have predicted. And sometimes that's because the examiner doesn't understand the invention. And sometimes it's because of the language that you're using and it needs to be more narrowed. But if you know that on the drafting end, a lot of problems can be solved. The process can be streamlined.
Yeah, Gene, I couldn't agree more about your point about knowing it at the drafting end. I think that's critical. And the thing is, there's so many different KSR rationales, so many different ways that you can put prior art together these days that you don't know what the examiner is going to use. And, the more embodiments and the more variations you can have initially, the less you're going to have to argue about things like impermissible hindsight bias and the legal side of it. You can focus it more back to the factual issues, and you can claim additional elements that you never would have had there to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in the chat, Chris has pointed out that examiners are going to have access to this particular tool. So if examiners are going to have access to this tool, I don't know how you're going to be able to not have access to this tool. Knowing what they know and knowing that they have access to this tool and that you can also have access to this tool. I mean, I think that's, I'm preaching now, I know, but the whole issue about searching prior to filing has always been something that I have, at times it just feels like I've been throwing water into the wind and getting wet. But now hopefully people are getting that message. And if you haven't gotten that message yet, you will get that message as the examiners continue to use better and better AI solutions themselves. Gentlemen, we're almost at the end of our hour here, and I see some people are signing out in the chat saying thank you. They got to go. Before we hit the end of the hour and people have to go back to their daily routine, what is your final thought? If there's one thing that you hope that they take away from this conversation, what is that one thing? Chris, let's start with you.
I hope they take away that, it's worth at least evaluating an AI system. The times are moving on such a point, AI is not new, like we pointed out before. This is something that is coming. It's going to affect every industry, and it's going to be critical to making sure that you're doing that reasonable search in the background. So if there's one thing I hope people take away, it's just to at least start evaluating systems to see how they can fit into your business.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks, Chris. And Jim?
I would say AI is here now. It's adding value to our clients that use our software and giving them a return on their investment. I think it's a critical juncture in addressing ethical AI at the moment. President Biden's executive order is extremely timely. And I would add to this that, like I said earlier, the pace of development is probably being underestimated. The increase in GPU compute is going to be astronomical. What you think of today as problems with generative AI, hallucinations, citations, things of that nature, are not going to be substantial problems in the near future. So the pace is going to increase possibly exponentially within the next few years. And I think that would be my takeaway for everyone.
Yeah. Great stuff, guys. I think this was a fascinating conversation. I encourage all of you to investigate using AI. Just make sure that whatever tool you do wind up settling on, and it'll probably be more than one tool. AI is integrating into everything anymore. But before you adopt any tool that does incorporate AI, just make sure you have a good feel for what the training data is, whether they're going to use your input as training data, and go through these issues of accountability and transparency and safety and security. Because Jim, you just mentioned it really quickly about the security, but that you guys incorporate, but that is critical as well. I mean, because if you're using these tools, you can't afford to allow somebody to hack in and see what you're doing. I mean, and a lot of these are going to be targets the more people that start using it. So you want to make sure that you're using a tool that you can feel comfortable with, because to a large extent, you're going to be putting your professional seal of approval onto this in anything that you do wind up using. So you want to make sure you're using something that's trustworthy. And that's all I have to say. But thank you all for being here. Thank you guys, gentlemen, for a great conversation. I think it was fascinating. If I know we had some questions we didn't get to, we'll make sure that IP.com gets all those questions and we'll follow up with everybody. But that's all we have for today. We hope to see you again soon. But bye for now.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.